it can make you set things up wrong. And then essentially you have to live with that for the rest of your life. It may be harmless, but it could actually be harmful and alter your predisposition to disease. So what we're saying in the report is that if women still are concerned about chemical exposures, then there are simple things that you can do to actually minimize your exposure, such as, for example, don't buy new furniture which will give off fire retardant fumes. Leave that until after you've finished breastfeeding. If you're going to paint the baby's room, as you're likely to, then get your husband to do it and go and stay with your mum for 2 days so all the fumes are away. And reduce your intake of processed, microwave, packaged foods, because we know that's an important source of exposure to chemicals. And things that you stick on your skin, gels and things like this. They're relatively small changes that can be made, and they're not going to do the baby any harm. Whether they do it any good, we're not going to know for years to come.
This is, as you said, aimed specifically at pregnant women. It's a very particular time in the life of a woman and, of course, of the fetus. Are there lessons or are there things that the rest of us might draw from this?
Well, I think one of the messages that I hope comes across in the report is that we need to be more aware of how we're exposed to chemicals, that we're exposed via routes that we never really thought of. What we're saying is that, in pregnancy, because it's a special case, why not reduce exposure to those? Now, for the rest of us, I think it's far less of an issue. I'm unlikely to change my lifestyle on that basis. And if my wife was pregnant, I would want her to do the sorts of things that we're saying in that report, just to play safe.
Professor Richard Sharp. So is this just a sensible list of precautions for pregnant women? Zoe Williams is a columnist with The Guardian newspaper.
I think any medical body coming out with a list of advice based on evidence that they don't have, and they freely state that they probably won't have for at least a decade, is not only not sensible, but really curious.
But even if they don't have empirical evidence, if there's enough to warrant their concern, I mean, and they're only saying, look, please avoid, if possible, if necessary.
Well, firstly, I would say there was no evidence. Did you hear anything in there that was actually evidence-based? All that he said was, we know that the fetus is at a very vulnerable time. Well, that's been common knowledge before medicine was invented. And secondly, we know chemicals can be harmful. There's absolutely, he had nothing. I mean, if you don't know the difference between a 1 in a million chance of harm and a 20% chance of harm, then you don't have any information at all. That's as good as hocus pocus. I mean, that is actually very not dissimilar to astronomy.
Well, is it worse? Yes, quite. Is it worse than that? Is it in attempting, as he said, to try and counter scaremongering articles by not coming up with specifics? Is that actually damaging?
I think this is a neurotics charter, really. I mean, it basically already the advice given to pregnant women was very kind of erring on the side of caution. I think it undermines reasonable advice when the advice is so broad that you can't really live in the modern world and keep to it.
Why undermining? Isn't it underlining it? Isn't it?
Well,
I mean, even if he doesn't have specifics, he's saying, look, just play it safe.
Yeah, but look, if you've got the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists telling you not to get in a new car and to go and stay with your mother for 2 days if you want to paint anything, if your husband wants to paint anything, then you're basically setting up a state of such hyper caution, i.e. very profound changes to your life based on no evidence at all, that I think undermines that body's advice in other areas. So if they then say, don't eat tuna because it may have mercury in it, or don't pick up cat feces because you might get toxoplasmosis, plenty of women will think, well, you, as an institution, have been completely undermined for me by the fact that you tell me not to be in my own house while my husband is painting.
But if that's sensible advice, even if, they can't say now, they can say, look, we're working on this, but while we don't know, err on the side of caution.
Well, okay,
that sounds sensible, doesn't it?
Say somebody says, we think going on an aeroplane increases your chances as a man of 30 of having a premature heart attack. Now, we don't know if that's 1 in a million chance or a 20% chance. Would you, in consequence, not go on an aeroplane? You would say, well, either take this seriously and do some proper research and then tell me, or stop scaremongering. You wouldn't say, I'm just going to change my lifestyle entirely based on no evidence.
Yeah, you're sounding quite puzzled as to why they've brought this out.
Yeah.
Why do you think they've done it?
ascribe a kind of political motivation to the RTOG, but I think broadly speaking, pregnant women are loaded with advice to turn every single thing that could possibly result their fetus into a problem of theirs, i.e. if there's a problem in the environment which causes fetal kind of abnormalities, then it was for you to sort it out and it was for you to avoid it. Now, that is not viable. If there is a problem in the larger environment which is causing damage to fetuses, then we need to go after the people who are putting the wrong kind of chemicals in research and stuff like that.
Yeah, but surely in the short term,
No, not in the short term.
well, the short term, if a pregnant woman is exposed to something potentially dangerous, in the short term, if she can do something about it, shouldn't she?
Well, can you do the potential danger, which you know nothing about, you don't know how dangerous it is?
Sorry, Williams, coming up in 30 minutes' time, we'll be hearing a Chinese workers' view of the United States. And on tomorrow's edition of NewsHour, we'll have an exclusive interview with the man who's been at the heart of US-China diplomacy for over 40 years, Henry Kissinger.
A conflict between China and the United States, a military conflict, would have consequences very similar to the impact of World War I on Europe.
The view of a top diplomat there tomorrow. Later on, we'll have a view from Chinese worker. Do stay with us here on NewsHour from the BBC World Service.
Distribution of the BBC World Service NewsHour in the U.S. is made possible by American public media, engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM, American Public Media, with support from Lumosity.com, pioneering the use of neuroscience-based online games to help people everywhere unlock their brain's full potential. Learn more at Lumosity.com.
29 minutes now past 9 o'clock. This is the BBC NewsHour here on 89.7 NPR News. Good morning, I'm Steve Brown. 89.7 NPR News visits the Columbus Arts Festival to celebrate all things art Friday beginning at 10 a.m. Here all sides with Dan Fisher broadcasting live with a look at the artists and activities at this year's Arts Fest. That's the Columbus Arts Festival Friday on 89.7 NPR News. Look for clear skies through the afternoon and a high near 80. The chance of rain builds overnight tonight.
Coming up on NewsHour in the next 30 minutes, the hopes and challenges for Nawaz Sharif as he begins his third term as Pakistan's Prime Minister. President Obama reshuffles his national security team. And a voice from the abattoir, one Chinese workers' view of the United States. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is James Kimarasawi with NewsHour. Now a summary of the latest world news.
BBC News with Mariam Marshall. Syrian pro-government forces have recaptured the strategic town of Qusair after a siege lasting more than 2 weeks. The rebels said they withdrew overnight. Damascus described the success in Qusair as an important strategic victory. The town is near the Lebanese border and lies along vital supply routes for both government and opposition forces. The new Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has been sworn in for an unprecedented third term. He was sworn in by President Asif Ali Zardari at the Presidential Palace in Islamabad. Earlier in the day, Mr. Sharif made a speech to Parliament in which he appealed for unity and an end to American drone strikes. At least 3 women from Burma's Rohingya minority were killed, and the police opened fire on a group of demonstrators in the state of Rakhine. The women, one of whom was pregnant, were protesting because the authorities were planning to move them to another temporary camp. China has begun an investigation into the price of wine from the European Union, a day after France led EU moves to impose duties on imports of Chinese-made solar panels. It said they were being sold at less than cost price to corner the market. France, China's largest wine supplier, has described Beijing's decision as reprehensible and inappropriate. The European Commission has announced that Latvia has fulfilled all the conditions to join the other 17 EU nations using the single currency, the euro. Officials in Washington say President Obama will appoint Susan Rice to the post of National Security Advisor. Susan Rice, currently the U.S. representative to the United Nations, will replace Tom Donilon, who is expected to resign after 2 years in the post. Anti-government protesters in Turkey have presented a list of demands to the Deputy Prime Minister, Bülent Arınç, during a meeting aimed at halting nationwide demonstrations. BBC World Service News.
listening to the BBC World Service. I'm James Kamarasamy with NewsHour. We go to Pakistan now, where a historic democratic change of power was completed today. Nawaz Sharif elected Prime Minister by the country's parliament and later sworn into office. The man who was overthrown by the military nearly 14 years ago. He began his third term in the post with a speech that included a pledge to overturn America's policy of unmanned drone attacks in Pakistan's tribal areas.
और ये रोज का जो सिलसिला है जो ड्रोन्स के अटैक का ये सिलसिला ये बंद होना चाहिए पिछला भी
And this event happens day after day after day. This issue of drone attacks, it has to stop. We respect other people's sovereignty. Evidently, others should respect ours also. It shouldn't be that we keep respecting other sovereignty and no one bothers about us. This issue that's been happening for several years, this issue has to stop.
Nawaz Sharif, well, there are of course plenty of issues on his plate, and our correspondent Orla Gearin has been to Nawaz Sharif's political heartland, Lahore, to assess the prospects of his latest term in office.
Bus going towards Gajrapada is arriving on the platform in 2 minutes.
It's morning rush hour in Lahore, and I've just squeezed onto a crowded bus. It's standing room only in here. There's air conditioning, and that's a relief because it's brutally hot. This is the Metro bus. It's the new mass transport system built at lightning speed by Nawaz Sharif's party. He's promised to take Pakistan on a journey to prosperity. We've come to ask the people here what are the biggest issues for them.
My name is Noor and I am 20. I am doing software engineering and I expect Nawaz Sharif to work for the economy, to protest against the drone attack and to work for literacy.
Do you think he can succeed?
He have to work hard for that.
My name is Hasnan Said and I'm a fashion designer. He's a man with vision.
So what is your message to Nawaz Sharif?
It's my request to Nawaz Sharif that please first priority, do your first priority to our electricity problems.
We're in one of Lahore's congested, dusty back streets. There are election posters still hanging from decrepit buildings. And there are huge sacks of shredded paper lining the road. This area is famous for the printing trade. Or at least it was. Many firms have closed already, and soon the presses will stop rolling like Oracle printing, because the electricity is off 12 hours a day. Over glasses of sweet tea, the owner, Karan Ali, told us his life's work is ruined.
The situation really hurts. After working for 35 years, we have nothing. Now we are going to close down and try to sell the machine.
My father came as an immigrant from India in Calcutta. We used to live there, and he started his business of publishing.
Mian Mohammed Mansha has come a long way since then. He's Pakistan's richest man, thanks to interests in banking, textiles and cement. In his airy office overlooking Lahore, we got his views on his fellow tycoon, Nawaz Sharif.
Margaret Thatcher comes to my mind because my early years in UK, when I was a student, and at that time I remember strikes and all the things that she did. And I really think that we need a Margaret Thatcher in Pakistan, and I am sure Nawaz Sharif has very similar attributes.
Outside Lahore, a ceremonial ritual just before sunset. It's the nightly closing of the border with India, Pakistan's old enemy. Uniformed guards from both sides shout and stamp their way through a drill full of pantomime aggression. But Nawaz Sharif might improve relations with Pakistan's neighbours, says commentator Ahmed Rashid.
If he can bring about a regional settlement in Afghanistan, peace with India, I think the West will welcome him. And if he can bring about an economic revival, people are very worried about a nuclear state like Pakistan with 100 nuclear weapons going down the tubes.
canal in Lahore. Some plunge into the muddy waters, fully dressed. It's their only escape from the punishing temperatures and the power cuts. For Pakistan and its new Prime Minister, this is the start of a long, hot summer.
Paula Gearin reporting from Lahore. Well, all is back in Islamabad now, keeping an eye on that first day in office of Nawaz Sharif and those comments we mentioned earlier about unmanned drones. Were they to be expected?
I think it was very much to be expected that one of the first things Nawaz Sharif would do was address this issue. He said similar things during the campaign. He expressed his opposition. The drone strikes are extremely unpopular here. They are considered to be not just an attack on Pakistani sovereignty, but also counterproductive. Many critics here would point out that the strikes kill innocent people and also generate greater animosity towards the United States and greater militancy. Now, he did make a direct call today, as you heard, for the strikes to come to an end. He said it was a daily occurrence that had to stop. He said Pakistan respected the sovereignty of other nations and its sovereignty and independence must be respected. I think Washington will be quite prepared to give this the deaf ear. This is basically the position that Pakistani officials have been expressing for years, and Washington has carried on with the strikes, which are a very central platform of President Obama's approach to dealing with militancy. U.S. officials will say they get results, they target dangerous militants, and I think it's very unlikely that the drone strikes will stop or that Nawaz Sharif will want to push the issue very hard.
But the majority of that speech was about the economy. What did he have to say? What did he have to promise?
Well, he acknowledged the very poor state of Pakistan's finances. He said the economy, in fact, was so bad it was hard to imagine. He said there were huge repayments to be made. He said he and his team would not rest until there was an improvement. He promised to make progress on things like unemployment, on corruption, and of course on the crippling power crisis, which we reported on there in Lahore. There are power cuts in parts of this country, including major cities, that last for 20 hours a day. In some parts of the rural areas, the situation is much worse. So there's no doubt this is the critical first issue, the first thing in the in-tray that Nawaz Sharif has to tackle. He's taking power as the summer heat is coming in. It's already sweltering. The economy has been grinding to a halt. Investment has been grinding to a halt. But I think there is a degree of guarded optimism now, particularly among the business community. Nawaz Sharif, who was a very wealthy man himself, a successful steel magnate, is seen as being pro-business, pro-privatization. In his previous terms in office, he managed to get the economy moving. And there is a sense here, certainly among investors, that he is somebody who could try to turn the economy around. There's also a feeling among the general population that he's come in with a strong mandate. That's extremely important. He has a comfortable majority in Parliament. There is therefore an opportunity to push through unpopular economic measures, like forcing people to pay taxes. Only about 1% of the population here or less actually do that. He's also going to have to tackle very costly subsidies on fuel. So there are a lot of unpalatable choices to be made. There is a feeling that Nawaz Sharif could do that if he has the stomach for it, because he has the mandate. And his supporters are stressing that he is an older and wiser politician, that he is now a man of consensus. But many here will remember that his previous 2 terms ended badly, ousted once by the army and during his first term in office on corruption charges.
Paula Gearin there in Islamabad. Well, a new Prime Minister in Pakistan and something of a jobs merry-go-round in Washington today as well. Certainly in the upper echelons of the Obama administration's security team. Officials say that Susan Rice, who's currently the US ambassador to the United Nations, will be replacing Tom Donnellan as President Obama's national security advisor. Let's speak to our Washington correspondent, Paul Adams. Let's start with the outgoing national security advisor, if he is indeed outgoing, Tom Donnellan. Often these figures are quite well known. Think of Zbigniew Brzezinski. There have been others who have been well known. He was a bit of a man of the shadows, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and I think that's the way he preferred it. He's regarded as a cautious realist, a man who kept pretty quiet, didn't talk much to the media, but was regarded as increasingly influential behind the scenes. in terms of foreign and security policy within the Obama White House. He had been expected to leave at the end of Obama's first term, but because we had the major changeover with new Secretaries of State and Secretary of Defense, he stayed on. And so his departure is not much of a surprise, but it does certainly mean the departure of a very, very important and influential, and some would say abrasive and difficult character